Hello and welcome back. Tonight, we're spending time with the Labrador Retriever, a dog so woven into the fabric of modern life that we've almost forgotten it had a life before suburban backyards and tennis balls. If you genuinely enjoy these quiet dives into dog history, consider leaving a like or subscribing. No pressure. Just if it helps you sleep or think or both. And if you'd like, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. I'm always curious who's out there in the dark with me. Dim the lights if you haven't already. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Get comfortable. Let's ease into tonight's journey. Picture this. It's late evening, and somewhere in a house much like yours, a yellow Labrador is sprawled across the living room floor. Not on the dog bed, never on the dog bed, but directly in the pathway between the couch and the kitchen, as if guarding a trade route. The dog is asleep, or pretending to be, one ear occasionally swiveling toward the rustle of a snack bag. There's a tennis ball under the coffee table. There's always a tennis ball under the coffee table. This is the Labrador most of us know, friendly to the point of absurdity, perpetually hungry, possibly the least suspicious animal ever bred. If you've spent any time around labs, you know they treat strangers like long-lost relatives and assume every hand holds food. They are, in modern terms, aggressively optimistic. But here's what we forget. This dog, this enthusiastic, tennis ball-obsessed companion, was not designed for living rooms. It was designed for ice water, howling wind, and the kind of work that would exhaust most humans before breakfast. The Labrador Retriever is a working dog from a cold, unforgiving place, and its history is written in cod, salt spray, and the black rocks of Newfoundland's coast. Let's be clear about one thing right away. The Labrador Retriever is not from Labrador. It's from Newfoundland. This is one of those naming accidents that stuck, and now we're all living with it. The dog that would become the Labrador Retriever began its life on the island of Newfoundland, off the eastern coast of Canada, in a time when that place was less a destination and more a testing ground for human endurance. We're talking about the 18th and early 19th centuries here. Newfoundland was a landscape of fishing villages clinging to rocky shores, forests so thick you could vanish into them, and an ocean so cold it could kill you in minutes. The people who lived there were fishermen, primarily, working the Grand Banks, some of the richest fishing grounds in the world. And they needed help. Not just any help. They needed a dog that could work in water that would stop your heart. A dog that could haul nets, retrieve fish that slipped overboard, carry ropes between boats, and do all of this without complaint, in storms, in fog, in conditions that made survival a daily negotiation. They needed a dog with a work ethic that bordered on supernatural, and a coat that repelled water like oiled canvas. So they began to shape one. The ancestors of the Labrador were called St. John's dogs, or lesser Newfoundland dogs, to distinguish them from the much larger Newfoundland breed that was developing alongside them. Think less giant fluffy bear, more compact otter. The St. John's dog was medium-sized, built low and strong, with a short, dense coat that shed water almost instantly. Black, usually, smooth, built for swimming and pulling and working dawn to dusk in the North Atlantic's merciless climate. The exact origins are murky, as these things often are. Likely a mix of working dogs brought over by English, Irish and Portuguese fishermen. Dogs bred for function, not pedigree. Setters, perhaps. Pointers. Water dogs from Portugal. Nobody was keeping detailed records. They were keeping themselves alive. But what emerged was a type, a recognizable working dog that became indispensable to the Newfoundland fishing trade. Imagine the scene. Dawn breaking grey and cold over a harbour thick with wooden boats. The smell of salt and fish and wood smoke. Men in heavy wool preparing nets, and among them, moving with purpose, a black dog with a tail like an otter's rudder. The dog waits at the edge of the dock, watching, not with the frantic energy of a pet eager to play, but with the focused attention of a professional. The boat pushes off into water so cold it steams in the morning air. The dog is already aboard, positioned near the bow, eyes on the nets. This is not a dog that retrieves tennis balls. This is a dog that retrieves cod. When a fish slips from the net, and fish always slip from nets, the dog goes over the side without hesitation. The water is just above freezing. For a human, immersion would mean shock, gasping, the immediate drain of body heat. For the St. John's dog, it's Tuesday. The double coat does its work, a dense, oily undercoat that traps warmth, and a short, stiff outer coat that sheds water on contact. The dog surfaces with the fish, swims back to the boat, and hauls itself up onto the deck, with the kind of upper body strength that comes from doing this 100 times a season. The tail, that thick, tapering tail, acts as a rudder. The webbed feet, naturally occurring in these dogs, provide propulsion. Everything about the animal is engineered for this. Not by human design in the deliberate sense, but by the slow, patient filter of survival. The dogs that couldn't handle the cold didn't reproduce. The dogs that tired easily didn't last. The dogs that loved the work, and this part is important, those were the ones the fishermen kept, fed, and brought home. Between boats, the dog might carry a rope. Hauling lines from one vessel to another was delicate work in rough seas, and a swimming dog could manage it where a rowboat might capsize. The dog's mouth was soft, meaning it could carry without puncturing, without damaging. A fish retrieved was a fish intact. This trait, this gentle mouth, would become one of the Labrador's defining features. But here, in the cold waters off Newfoundland, it was just practical. A destroyed fish was a wasted fish. Back on shore, the dog had other work, pulling small carts loaded with fish from the docks to the drying racks, hauling firewood, guarding the catch from opportunistic gulls and the occasional bold fox. The St. John's dog was, in essence, a multi-purpose working animal, in a place where specialization was a luxury nobody could afford. The temperament required for this life was specific. The dog needed to be biddable, willing to take direction, to work alongside humans without constant management. It needed to be steady in chaos. Storms, shouting, the violence of ocean weather. It needed to be resilient, capable of working day after day without breaking down, physically or mentally. And this is the part that surprises people. It needed to be gentle. A dog that snapped or bit was a liability on a small boat. A dog that panicked was worse than useless. So the fishermen, without realizing they were conducting a centuries-long breeding program, selected for dogs that were calm, cooperative, and inexhaustibly driven to work in water. They weren't writing this down. They weren't presenting papers at kennel clubs. They were just keeping the dogs that made their lives easier and letting the others go. This went on for generations, decades, the better part of a century. The St. John's dog became a fixture of Newfoundland life, as much a part of the landscape as the boats and the fog and the endless rhythm of the fishing season. And then, inevitably, people from elsewhere noticed, English sportsmen primarily. Wealthy men who came to Newfoundland for cod and left with something more valuable, dogs. By the early 1800s, St. John's dogs were being brought back to England, where they caught the attention of aristocrats who spent their time shooting game birds across sprawling estates. These men had pointing dogs and setting dogs, but they needed something else. A dog that would retrieve shot birds from cold water, from marshes, from dense cover, and bring them back undamaged. The St. John's dog, it turned out, was perfect for this. The retriever work required in England was different from hauling nets in Newfoundland, but the skills translated beautifully. Soft mouth, love of water, tireless drive, eagerness to please. The English sporting class began importing these dogs in numbers, breeding them deliberately now, refining the type. They called them Labrador dogs, likely because they associated Newfoundland with the Labrador Sea, or perhaps because Labrador sounded more exotic. The name stuck, even though it was geographically wrong. In England, the breed began to take its modern shape. The occasional brown or yellow puppy that appeared in litters of black dogs started to be valued rather than dismissed. Breeding records were kept. Standards were discussed. The Labrador Retriever, as a distinct breed, was emerging from the working anonymity of its island origins into the formal world of kennel clubs and pedigrees. But let's be clear about what was happening here. This was not improvement. This was documentation. The English aristocracy didn't create the Labrador Retriever. They found it already functional, already excellent at what it did, and they wrote it down. They gave it a name and a standard and a place in their record books. The dog itself, the animal that would swim into freezing water because a human asked it to, that dog was shaped by Newfoundland fishermen who never saw a dog show in their lives. By the mid-1800s, the Labrador Retriever had two lives. One in the cold working harbours of Newfoundland, where it still hauled nets and retrieved cod. Another in the green estates of England, where it fetched pheasants and lived in kennels, maintained by gamekeepers who brushed their coats and recorded their lineages in leather-bound books. the English breeding programs focused on consistency. They wanted dogs that looked alike, that produced predictable offspring, that met a standard. Black remained the dominant colour for decades, serious, workmanlike, traditional. But those occasional yellow and brown puppies kept appearing, genetic possibilities that had always been there, waiting. By the early 1900s, breeders began to accept and even seek out these variations. Yellow labs became fashionable. Chocolate labs followed. The gene pool expanded within controlled limits. Meanwhile, back in Newfoundland, the original St. John's dog was disappearing. This is the quiet tragedy that sits at the centre of many working dog histories. The place that created the breed often loses it. Newfoundland imposed heavy dog taxes and strict licensing laws in the late 1800s, partly to encourage sheep farming, partly due to concerns about rabies. Keeping a working dog became expensive. Families had to choose between paying for the dog or paying for other necessities. Many chose the latter. The St. John's dog population declined. By the early 20th century, it was nearly extinct in its homeland. But in England, the Labrador Retriever thrived. Kennel clubs recognized the breed. Standards were formalized. The dogs were exhibited, judged, bred with intention. What had been a type became a breed. What had been a working animal became, increasingly, something else. A dual-purpose dog, valued for work, but also for temperament, appearance, and the status it conferred on its owner. The Earl of Malmesbury is often credited with stabilizing the breed in England, maintaining a kennel of Labradors through the mid-1800s and into the next generation. The Duke of Buccleuch and the Earl of Home also kept important breeding lines. These were not sentimental pet owners. These were men who needed functional gun dogs and had the resources to maintain breeding programs over decades. They preserved the Labrador not out of nostalgia, but because the dog worked and worked well, and they wanted to ensure it continued to do so. The first Labrador Retriever Club was established in England in 1916. The breed standard was refined and published. By the 1920s, Labradors were being exported back across the Atlantic, not to Newfoundland, where the original dogs were gone, but to the United States, where they found a new audience among American sportsmen. And here, in America, the Labrador's story takes another turn. American hunters appreciated the dog's retrieving instinct and water drive, but they also noticed its temperament. The Labrador wasn't just a working dog, it was a pleasant dog. It tolerated children. It didn't snap or guard aggressively. It seemed, almost bizarrely, to enjoy the company of humans in a way that went beyond mere training. This wasn't accident. This was the result of those generations of selection in Newfoundland, where a dog that bit or panicked on a small boat wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. So the Labrador began its transformation from gun dog to family dog, a shift that would accelerate dramatically after World War II. Let's talk about what that actually means. By the 1950s and 60s, America was suburbanizing rapidly. Families were moving into single-family homes with yards. The post-war economy was booming. Pet ownership was rising. People wanted dogs, but they wanted dogs that fit into domestic life. Dogs that could be around kids, that didn't require constant management, that were friendly to neighbors and postal workers. The Labrador Retriever, with its stable temperament and biddable nature, was nearly ideal for this role. It wasn't a guard dog, which some families found disappointing, but it also wasn't a liability. It didn't have the high-strung intensity of some herding breeds or the independence of hounds. It wanted to be near people, wanted to please people, and would tolerate an enormous amount of clumsy affection from small humans. Breed registrations climbed. By the 1970s, the Labrador was one of the most popular breeds in America. By the 1990s, it was the most popular breed, a position it has held for decades. Millions of Labradors, living lives their Newfoundland ancestors would find utterly bewildering. No cod to retrieve, no nets to haul, just couches, kibble, and the occasional walk around the block. But here's the thing about working dog genetics. They don't just vanish because the work does. A Labrador Retriever in a suburban home still carries the drives and instincts that made it excellent at its original job. It still wants to retrieve. It still loves water. It still has energy reserves designed for swimming in the North Atlantic, not lounging in climate-controlled living rooms. This is where misunderstandings begin. People see a Labrador puppy, friendly, adorable, eager, And they think, easy, low maintenance, perfect family dog. And then the dog is 10 months old and eating the drywall and pulling like a sled dog on leash and losing its mind with excitement every time a leaf moves. The owners are baffled. The dog is just being a Labrador. Let's be clear about what a Labrador actually is. It's an athlete, not in the modern sense of gets exercise twice a week, but in the sense of was bred to work physically demanding jobs for hours at a time. A healthy adult Labrador has stamina that can outlast most humans. It was built to swim in freezing water, haul loads, retrieve repeatedly, and still be ready for more. That drive doesn't disappear just because you named it Buddy and gave it a bed shaped like a donut. In modern terms, owning a Labrador without providing adequate physical and mental work is like hiring an Olympic swimmer and asking them to sit quietly in a waiting room all day. They'll do it because Labradors are agreeable, but they won't be happy, and eventually something will give. Usually, it's your furniture. The retrieving instinct, in particular, is almost comically strong. A Labrador that doesn't have appropriate objects to retrieve will find inappropriate ones. Shoes, remote controls, entire rolls of paper towels, unspooled across the house like festive garland. The dog isn't being destructive out of malice. It's being a retriever without anything to retrieve. The instinct has nowhere to go, so it goes everywhere. Water drive is similar. Show a Labrador a pond, a lake, a puddle, a decorative fountain at the mall. It doesn't matter. And watch the dog's entire being orient toward that water. This is genetic memory. This is 1800 fishing boats off Newfoundland, encoded. The dog doesn't know why it needs to be in that water. It just knows it does, with a certainty that overrides most training if the training hasn't accounted for this. This is not a flaw. This is the breed working as designed. The problem is the mismatch between what the dog was built to do and what it's being asked to do now. Think less golden couch ornament, more enthusiastic personal trainer who never gets tired and always wants one more lap. But when the work is provided, when a Labrador gets to retrieve, swim, run, use its nose, engage its considerable problem-solving abilities, it becomes a different animal. Calm, focused, happy in a deep, satisfied way that has nothing to do with treats or praise. This is a dog doing what it was meant to do, and you can see the relief in its body language. There's a reason Labradors excel as service dogs, guide dogs, search and rescue dogs, detection dogs. It's not just the temperament, though that helps. It's the drive, the willingness to work repetitively without boredom, the focus, the desire to partner with a human on a task. These traits, selected for by Newfoundland fishermen who needed reliable help in brutal conditions, translate beautifully into modern working roles. A guide dog leading someone through a crowded city is doing something fundamentally similar to a St. John's dog navigating a fishing boat through fog. It's reading the environment, making decisions, keeping its humans safe. The context has changed. The underlying ability hasn't. Detection dogs, searching for explosives, narcotics, agricultural contraband, are using that same retrieving drive, redirected. The dog isn't bringing back a physical object. It's bringing back information. I found the thing you wanted me to find. The reward structure is the same. The satisfaction is the same. Search and rescue, Labradors, working disaster sites or wilderness areas, are combining stamina, scenting ability, and that intense desire to complete a task. They'll work until they collapse if you let them, which is why handlers have to manage their energy carefully. The drive that made them excellent at retrieving cod in freezing water also makes them excellent at locating lost hikers in mountain ranges. It's the same engine, different application. Now let's address some myths, because the Labrador's popularity has generated a lot of misunderstanding. Myth 1. Labradors are naturally obedient. Not quite. They're naturally biddable, which is different. A biddable dog wants to cooperate with you, wants to understand what you're asking, wants to please. But that doesn't mean it automatically knows what you want. A Labrador will happily do the wrong thing, with tremendous enthusiasm, if it thinks that's what you're asking for. They need clear communication and consistent training, like any working breed. The difference is that they're generally forgiving when you mess up the communication, and they'll keep trying to figure out what you mean. Myth 2. Labradors are low-energy family dogs. This one is persistent and problematic. Labradors are moderate to high energy, depending on the individual and the breeding line. Showline labs tend to be somewhat calmer than fieldline labs, but even showline labs need significant daily exercise. We're talking an hour minimum of real activity: swimming, retrieving, hiking, running. Not a 10-minute stroll around the block. A Labrador that seems lazy is often just a Labrador that's been conditioned to accept boredom, which isn't the same as being naturally low energy. Myth 3. All Labradors love everyone. Mostly true, but not universally. The breed standard calls for a friendly temperament, and most labs are indeed indiscriminately social. But temperament exists on a spectrum. Some labs are more reserved, some are more protective. Poor breeding, inadequate socialization, or negative experiences can produce a Labrador that's fearful or reactive. It's rare, but it happens. The assumption that all labs are automatically friendly can lead people to misread warning signs or push a dog past its comfort threshold. Myth 4. Labradors don't need training because they're naturally good. This might be the most damaging misconception. Labradors need training precisely because they're so driven and physically capable. An untrained lab is a 70-pound bundle of good intentions and poor impulse control. They'll knock over children while trying to greet them. They'll pull you down the street chasing a squirrel. They'll eat an entire bag of dog food if you leave it accessible, not because they're hungry, but because food motivation in labs is essentially infinite. Training doesn't suppress the dog's nature. It channels it. It gives all that energy and drive a structure to work within. Let's be clear. A well-trained Labrador is not a diminished Labrador. It's a Labrador that gets to participate more fully in human life because it understands the rules and can follow them. In modern terms, think of training, like teaching a talented but impulsive intern how your office works. They're capable and eager, but without structure, they'll accidentally CC the entire company on a draft email and somehow flood the break room. The food obsession deserves its own discussion because it's both a defining trait and a source of endless frustration for owners. Labradors are, as a rule, perpetually convinced they're starving. This isn't drama. This isn't exaggeration. A Labrador that just finished an entire meal will look at you with the soulful eyes of an animal that hasn't eaten in days. It's almost impressive. There's actually some genetic research behind this. A significant percentage of Labradors carry a mutation in a gene called POMC, which affects appetite regulation and satiety signaling. In practical terms, this means the "I'm full" message doesn't reach the brain as effectively as it should. The dog genuinely doesn't feel satisfied. It's always ready for more food. Always. This trait likely has roots in the breed's working history. A dog that needed to work all day in cold water benefited from being highly food motivated. Food meant fuel, and a dog that eagerly consumed calories when they were available had an advantage. The fishermen probably encouraged this, using food as a training reward and ensuring their working dogs stayed well fed. Over generations, the labs that were most food-driven were also the most trainable and the most valued. But in a modern home, where food is abundant and the dog isn't burning thousands of calories hauling nets, this trait becomes problematic. Obesity is endemic in the breed. A Labrador will eat itself into health problems if given the opportunity. They'll raid trash cans, counter-surf, open cabinets, and develop elaborate plans to access food. They're not being bad. They're being Labradors. But it means owners have to be vigilant about portions, storage, and the availability of edibles. And yes, edibles includes things you wouldn't think a dog would eat. Labradors have been known to consume entire loaves of bread, still in plastic bags, sticks of butter, whole raw onions, dish sponges, and on one memorable occasion documented by a veterinarian, a collection of decorative stones from a garden. The breed's retrieving instinct combined with food motivation creates an animal that puts things in its mouth first and evaluates whether they're food second. This brings us to health, which we should address gently but honestly. Labradors are generally sturdy dogs, but Newfoundland heritage means they're built to last, but they're prone to certain conditions that prospective owners should know about. Hip and elbow dysplasia are common in the breed. These are developmental conditions where the joints don't form properly, leading to arthritis and pain. Responsible breeders screen for this, but it's not entirely preventable. Weight management helps significantly. A lean Labrador puts less stress on its joints than an overweight one, and given the breed's tendency toward obesity, keeping them slim is one of the most important things an owner can do. Progressive retinal atrophy, a degenerative eye condition, appears in some lines. Exercise-induced collapse, a a condition where the dog's muscles suddenly weaken during intense activity, is another genetic concern. Ear infections are frequent, particularly in labs that swim often, because those floppy ears trap moisture. None of this means Labradors are fragile. Most live full, healthy lives well into their teens. But these are things to be aware of, to screen for if you're getting a puppy, to monitor as the dog ages. The breed's popularity has led to a lot of irresponsible breeding. Puppy mills, backyard breeders prioritizing profit over health. A well-bred Labrador from health-tested parents has much better odds than one from questionable sources. The color variations, black, yellow, chocolate, are purely cosmetic, genetically speaking. There's a persistent belief that chocolate labs are less intelligent or more hyperactive than other colors. This isn't supported by evidence. What is true is that chocolate labs, statistically, have shorter lifespans than black or yellow labs, likely due to a smaller genetic pool and the prioritization of color over health in some breeding programs. But an individual chocolate lab from good lines is just as capable and healthy as any other color. Let's talk about what living with a Labrador actually looks like in modern life, beyond the myths and the genetics. Picture a morning. The lab wakes up with you, possibly before you, possibly by shoving a cold nose into your face. There's no gradual transition from sleep to wakefulness with this dog. It's fully operational immediately, enthusiastic, ready for the day with an energy level you won't reach until after coffee. Breakfast is the highlight of the dog's morning, every morning, as if this is the first breakfast ever invented and you're a hero for providing it. The lab eats with focus and speed, inhaling kibble like it might be stolen mid-meal. Within seconds, the bowl is empty and the dog is looking at you hopefully, as if there might be a second breakfast. There isn't. There never is. The dog lives in eternal optimism. The walk is non-negotiable. A Labrador that doesn't get a morning walk is a Labrador making poor choices later. On the walk, the dog pulls toward every interesting smell, every other dog, every person, every squirrel, every leaf blowing across the sidewalk. Not aggressively, just with the certainty that everything is worth investigating and greeting. Training helps. A well-trained lab walks politely on leash, but the desire to engage with the entire world is always there, humming under the surface. If there's water, a creek, a pond, a decorative fountain in someone's yard, the lab will attempt to enter it. This is not optional from the dog's perspective. You can prevent it with training, but you can't eliminate the desire. The dog will pause at the edge, look at you, look at the water, and in its eyes you'll see the eternal struggle between obedience and genetic imperative. Back home, if the lab has been adequately exercised, it might settle. Might. This is the famous Labrador sprawl, flat on the floor, legs at improbable angles, possibly snoring. This state can last for hours if the dog is truly tired. But if the exercise was insufficient, the lab will find entertainment. This might be bringing you every toy it owns, one by one. This might be staring at you with intense focus, willing you to do something interesting. This might be wandering the house looking for mischief. The ideal Labrador life includes a job, not necessarily formal work, though many labs thrive in working roles, but something. Regular retrieving games, swimming sessions, nose work, agility, long hikes, anything that engages the body and mind together. A Labrador with a job is a content Labrador. A Labrador without one is a problem solver, and you might not like the problems it chooses to solve. With children, Labradors are typically patient to a fault. They'll tolerate ear-pulling, tail-grabbing, and being used as a pillow with remarkable grace. This doesn't mean they should have to endure these things. All dogs deserve respectful treatment, but the breed's tolerance threshold is genuinely high. A lab is more likely to walk away from an annoying interaction than to snap. This trait, again, comes from those fishing boat origins. A dog that reacted badly to being bumped or stepped on in close quarters wasn't safe to keep. But this patience shouldn't be mistaken for indestructibility. Labradors have limits. A dog that's constantly harassed, never given space to retreat, or pushed past its comfort level can develop anxiety or defensive behaviors. The fact that labs are generally tolerant makes it even more important to teach children how to interact appropriately. The dog will forgive a lot, but it shouldn't have to. In multi-dog households, Labradors tend to be social and playful. They're not typically dominant or aggressive with other dogs. They want to play, to wrestle, to engage. Sometimes this enthusiasm is too much for more reserved breeds. A lab will attempt to initiate play with a dog that clearly wants to be left alone, not out of malice, but out of sheer obliviousness. They read social cues eventually, but their default setting is everyone wants to be friends. With cats, it varies. Some labs have high prey drive and will chase anything that moves quickly. Others are gentle and seem genuinely confused about what the cat is. Much depends on early socialization and individual temperament. A lab raised with cats from puppyhood usually learns to coexist peacefully. A lab introduced to cats as an adult might see them as the most interesting squeaky toy in the world. The shedding is worth mentioning, because people consistently underestimate it. Labradors have a double coat that sheds year-round and blows out spectacularly twice a year during seasonal changes. You will find dog hair in places you didn't know existed, in your coffee, in sealed containers, in rooms the dog has never entered. This is not fixable. This is the price of that water-resistant coat that kept St. John's dogs alive in the North Atlantic. You can brush the dog daily, and you should, but you cannot stop the shedding. You can only manage it. The breed's versatility is one of its greatest strengths, and, paradoxically, one of the sources of confusion about what Labradors actually need. Because labs can adapt to many roles: family pet, service dog, hunting companion, therapy dog. People assume they're easy or undemanding. But versatility isn't the same as simplicity. A Labrador can thrive in many contexts, but only if the fundamental needs are met: exercise, mental stimulation, clear training, and work that engages their natural drives. A Labrador living with an active family that hikes, swims, and plays fetch daily is living its best life. A Labrador living with an elderly person who can't provide vigorous exercise but enrolls the dog in regular training classes, provides puzzle toys, and arranges play sessions with other dogs can also thrive. The contexts are different, but the principle is the same. The dog's drives must have appropriate outlets. Now, let's talk about one specific Labrador, because every breed history should include at least one individual who became more than just a representative of the type. His name was Endall, and he was a British service dog who became something close to famous in the world of assistance animals. Endall was a yellow Labrador, born in the mid-1990s, initially trained as a puppy for service work. He was paired with Alan Parton, a Royal Navy veteran who had been severely injured in a traffic accident during the Gulf War. Parton had significant physical disabilities and memory problems. He couldn't remember his wife's name, couldn't remember his children's faces. He was, in many ways, lost. Endall learned to help with the physical tasks, retrieving dropped items, opening doors, helping with balance. This was standard service dog work, impressive, but not unprecedented. What made Endall remarkable was what he did beyond training. He learned to operate an ATM, retrieving cash and the card for Parton. He could load and unload a washing machine. He understood over 100 verbal commands and a similar number of signs. But more than the tasks, he seemed to understand context and need in ways that went beyond programmed responses. There's a documented incident from 2001. Parton was struck by a car in a parking lot and knocked from his wheelchair, unconscious. Endall pulled him into the recovery position, retrieved his mobile phone and pushed it against his face, covered him with a blanket from the wheelchair bag, and then ran to a nearby hotel to get help. He had never been trained for this specific scenario. He assessed, improvised, and acted. This is where the Labrador's working heritage becomes visible in the most profound way. The biddability, the problem solving, the focus on the human partner. These aren't trained into the breed. They're selected for generation after generation, starting with those Newfoundland fishermen who kept the dogs that could read a situation and respond appropriately. Endall worked with Parton for over a decade. He was named Dog of the Millennium by Dogs Today magazine. When he retired due to arthritis, another Labrador, EJ, took over. Endall died in 2009, and his obituary ran in major newspapers. Not because he was a celebrity dog in the usual sense, but because he represented something people recognized as extraordinary. A working partnership that transcended training. A dog that seemed to genuinely understand the assignment at a level beyond commands. But here's the important part. Endall wasn't a unique genetic miracle. He was an exceptionally well-bred, well-trained and well-matched Labrador, doing what Labradors were built to do: work closely with a human, solve problems, and remain steady under pressure. Thousands of Labradors are doing similar work right now, less publicly, just as capably. The guide dog leading someone through a subway station, the detection dog working a port, the therapy dog visiting a hospital, the search and rescue dog quartering a wilderness area. these are all end-alls. These are all descendants of those black dogs on Newfoundland fishing boats, still working, still partnering with humans, still driven by something that lives deeper than training. The difference between a Labrador doing this kind of work and a Labrador lying on a suburban couch isn't ability, it's opportunity. The couch dog has the same genetics, the same potential drives, the same capacity for partnership. It just doesn't have a job that engages those capacities. This isn't a judgment of pet owners. Most people don't need a service dog or a detection dog. They need a companion. But it's worth understanding that the companion sleeping in a sunbeam right now is carrying within it the potential to do remarkable things, if asked. This is part of why enrichment matters so much for pet Labradors. The dog might not be retrieving cod or helping someone navigate a city, but it still needs to use its brain. Puzzle feeders that make the dog work for its food, hide-and-seek games with treats or toys, learning new tricks, even silly ones, because the learning itself is satisfying. Scent work, hiding objects and having the dog find them, taps into the tracking and retrieving instincts in a way that's deeply fulfilling for the dog. Swimming is perhaps the most direct connection to the breed's origins. A Labrador in water is a Labrador fully alive. The way they move changes. Fluid, powerful, purposeful. The enthusiasm that can be overwhelming on land becomes focused. This is what they were built for. The ottertail works as designed. The water-shedding coat does its job. The webbed feet propel them forward with surprising speed. If you have access to safe swimming areas in a Labrador, use them. The dog will be tired in a good way, physically satisfied in a way that regular walking doesn't quite achieve. Retrieving games, done properly, are another direct line to the breed's working heritage. Not just throwing a ball mindlessly, though Labradors will do that forever if you let them, but structured retrieves, varying the distance, varying the terrain, having the dog wait before retrieving, building impulse control, using the retrieving drive to reinforce training. This is play that's also work, or work that's also play. The dog doesn't distinguish between them. The modern Labrador exists in a strange position. It's simultaneously one of the most popular breeds in the world and one of the most misunderstood. People know what Labradors look like. They can identify one at a distance. But they don't always know what Labradors are. Working dogs with substantial needs. Dogs built for serious physical labor. Dogs whose friendliness and biddability can mask how much exercise and mental engagement they actually require. This gap between perception and reality leads to a lot of Labradors in shelters and rescues. The story is usually the same. Family gets a lab puppy. Puppy is adorable. Puppy grows into a strong adolescent with energy and drives the family wasn't prepared for. Dog develops behavior problems from understimulation. Family surrenders. Dog. The dog isn't defective. The match was wrong. Rescue Labradors often thrive in their second homes because the people adopting adult dogs tend to have more realistic expectations. They know what they're getting. They've prepared for it. And many rescue labs, once given adequate exercise and structure, settle beautifully. That biddable temperament means they're often forgiving of their past circumstances and ready to bond with new people. There are also breed-specific rescues dedicated entirely to Labradors, staffed by people who understand the breed deeply and can match dogs with appropriate homes. These organizations often provide training support and education, helping new owners understand what their lab needs to thrive. This is the kind of infrastructure that emerges around popular breeds. Networks of people trying to address the problems created by popularity. The split between show lines and field lines has become more pronounced in recent decades. Showline labs tend to be stockier, calmer, bred for appearance and temperament. Field line labs tend to be leaner, higher energy, bred for working ability. Both are purebred Labradors. Both can make excellent companions. But the differences in energy level and drive can be significant. Someone looking for a moderate energy family dog probably wants a showline lab. Someone who runs marathons and wants a dog to train for dog sports probably wants a field line lab. It's not that one is better. They're just different tools for different contexts. This distinction would have made no sense to the Newfoundland fishermen. Their dogs were working dogs, period. But in the modern world, where most labs aren't working in the original sense, the breed has diverged into subpopulations optimized for different purposes. Its evolution in real time, driven by human selection, just as it was 200 years ago. Coat color politics is a real thing in the lab world, which is somewhat absurd but worth mentioning. Some breeders and enthusiasts have strong opinions about which colour is best or most traditional. Black labs are the original colour, historically dominant. Yellow labs became popular and are now equally common. Chocolate labs have had image problems, some deserved due to poor breeding practices, some not. Silver labs, a dilute colour that's either a legitimate colour variation or the result of mixed breeding depending on who you ask, are controversial in breed circles. None of this matters to the dog. A well-bred lab of any colour is still a lab. The genetics that determine coat colour are separate from the genetics that determine health, temperament, and working ability. But humans like to create hierarchies and drama, even around something as neutral as pigmentation. The Labrador's role in popular culture has reinforced both accurate and inaccurate perceptions of the breed. Labradors appear constantly in media as the idealized family dog, loyal, friendly, safe. This isn't wrong, exactly, but it's incomplete. The media lab is usually calm, well-behaved, and undemanding. Real labs are often energetic, goofy, and require significant time investment. The gap between the fictional lab and the actual lab in your living room can be jarring. There's also the Labrador as symbol of wholesomeness, reliability, American British domestic life. The dog appears in advertisements for everything from dog food to insurance to family vehicles. It's become visual shorthand for trustworthy normalcy. This has probably contributed to the breed's popularity, but it's also created expectations that real dogs struggle to meet. The working Labradors, the ones doing detection work, guide work, search and rescue, are performing invaluable services while remaining largely invisible to the public. Most people never see these dogs in action. They see the pet labs at the park, the ones chasing tennis balls and jumping in muddy ponds. The working dogs are at airports, sniffing luggage. They're in disaster zones, searching rubble. They're guiding people through subway systems and across busy intersections. They're doing the work the breed was built for, just in modern contexts. These working dogs aren't selected randomly. They come from specific breeding programs that prioritize drive, focus, and temperament. Not every Labrador has what it takes to be a working dog, even within this working breed. The dogs are tested extensively as puppies and adolescents. Many wash out of training programs, not because they're bad dogs, but because they lack the specific intensity or focus required. These dogs usually become excellent pets. They have most of the working traits, but not quite enough of the edge needed for professional work. The testing for service dog candidates is rigorous. Sound sensitivity, dogs that startle easily, don't make good guide dogs. Distractibility, a dog that can't maintain focus in chaotic environments won't succeed. Food motivation and toy drive need to be strong but manageable. The dog needs to be confident but not independent. Friendly but not overly social. It's a narrow window of temperament, and breeders spend decades refining lines to produce it consistently. Some organizations breed their own dogs. Others source from carefully selected breeders. The genetics matter enormously. A well-bred lab from working lines has a much higher success rate in training programs than a randomly selected lab, even though both are purebred. This is selection pressure in action, the same force that shaped the breed in Newfoundland, now shaping it for modern working roles. Let's address the reality of bringing a Labrador puppy into your life, because the puppy phase deserves its own discussion. Labrador puppies are intensely, almost aggressively, puppy-like. They're mouthy, they want to chew everything, including you. They're energetic in ways that seem physically impossible. They're clumsy, knocking over furniture and children with equal enthusiasm. They're incontinent for longer than you'd like, and they're relentlessly, exhaustingly cheerful about all of it. The biting phase is particularly challenging. Labrador puppies explore the world with their mouths, and their needle-sharp puppy teeth find everything. Hands, furniture, clothing, shoes, nothing is safe. This isn't aggression. This is normal puppy behavior, amplified by retrieving instinct. They're supposed to carry things in their mouths. They just haven't learned which things yet. Bite inhibition training is essential, tedious, and necessary. It takes months. Your hands will have small scars. This is the price of entry. House training is usually straightforward with labs, because they're eager to please and quick learners. But adolescence brings challenges. Between 6 months and 2 years, a Labrador is physically mature, but mentally still a puppy. This is the phase where training seems to evaporate. The dog that reliably came when called at 5 months suddenly develops selective hearing at 10 months. The dog that walked politely on leash is now pulling like a freight train. This isn't defiance, this is adolescence. Distractibility, increased independence, hormones, growth spurts that make the dog temporarily uncoordinated. Many Labradors are surrendered during adolescence because owners weren't prepared for this phase. The cute puppy has become a 70-pound teenager with opinions and energy and insufficient impulse control. But this phase passes. With consistent training and adequate exercise, most labs emerge from adolescence as stable, pleasant adult dogs. The key is surviving the interim. Spaying and neutering decisions have become more nuanced in recent years. Traditional advice was to spay or neuter early, around 6 months. Current research suggests waiting until physical maturity, 12 to 18 months or longer, may be better for joint development and long-term health, particularly in large breeds like Labradors. This means managing an intact adolescent dog, which brings its own challenges, but may result in a healthier adult. These are conversations to have with a veterinarian, considering the individual dog and the owner's circumstances. The cost of owning a Labrador is substantial and often underestimated. Quality food for a large, active dog adds up quickly. Veterinary care, routine and emergency, training classes, equipment, boarding or pet sitting when you travel, potential health issues as the dog ages. It's easily thousands of dollars per year, often more. This isn't a critique of people who can't afford it. It's a reality check. Labs are not low-maintenance budget dogs. They're expensive athletes who live for a decade or more. The time investment is equally significant. Daily exercise, not negotiable. Training, ongoing throughout the dog's life. Grooming, brushing, nail trims, ear cleaning. Veterinary appointments. Mental enrichment. A Labrador isn't a decoration. It's a commitment that shapes your daily schedule for years. For people whose lifestyle accommodates this, it's wonderful. For people expecting a low-maintenance companion, it's a shock. But when the match is right, when someone wants an active, biddable, affectionate partner for hiking and swimming and training, a Labrador is hard to beat. The breed's working heritage means it wants to be involved in your life. It wants to go where you go, do what you do. This can be annoying if you want independence from your dog. It's wonderful if you want a constant companion. The bond between a well-matched human and Labrador is a particular kind of relationship. The dog is attuned to you in ways that feel almost uncanny. It reads your mood, your energy level, your intentions. This isn't magic. This is the result of centuries of selection for dogs that work closely with humans, that pay attention, that care about human emotional states. A Labrador knows when you're sad, not because it's psychic, but because it's been bred to notice and respond to human signals. This attunement means Labradors are often excellent emotional support animals, even without formal training. They're present, they're responsive, they're physically affectionate in ways many breeds aren't. They lean against you, they rest their head on your lap. They follow you from room to room, not anxiously, just companionably. For people who want that kind of constant, gentle presence, it's deeply comforting. For people who value their personal space, it can be suffocating. This is another mismatch issue. A Labrador's natural inclination is to be near you, always. It will lie at your feet while you work. It will follow you to the bathroom. It will wait outside the shower. This isn't clinginess in a pathological sense. This is a working dog that's wired to stay with its human partner. In Newfoundland, a dog that wandered off or ignored its person was useless. So labs don't wander off. They stay close. Very close. Some people find this endearing. Others find it claustrophobic. Neither response is wrong. It's about knowing yourself and what you want from a dog. If you want an independent dog that does its own thing, a Labrador is not that dog. If you want a shadow that follows you everywhere with obvious delight, a Labrador is perfect. The breed's adaptability means labs can live almost anywhere. Apartments, suburban homes, rural properties. But the environment needs to match the exercise provision. A lab in a small apartment is fine if the owner provides substantial daily activity. A lab on a large property is fine if the owner actually engages with the dog rather than assuming the yard is sufficient. Space matters less than what you do with the dog in that space. Labradors in senior years often develop a particular kind of mellowness that's genuinely lovely. The frenetic energy subsides. The puppy enthusiasm remains, but becomes more measured. An old lab is still interested in everything, still wants to be involved, but no longer needs to be moving constantly. It's content to lie in a sunbeam and watch the world, to go for shorter walks at a slower pace, to retrieve a few times instead of 50. The transition from working adult to senior dog can be gradual or sudden, depending on health. Some labs remain active well into double digits. Others slow down around 8 or 9. Arthritis is common, manageable with medication and weight control. Vision and hearing may decline. The dog adapts, often more gracefully than its humans do. A blind lab will still navigate the house using memory and scent. A deaf lab will still respond to visual cues and vibrations. End-of-life decisions are never easy, but the Labrador's temperament can make them slightly less agonizing. When a lab is truly suffering, it often becomes obvious. The dog that always wanted to go, to do, to be involved. When it stops wanting those things, when it retreats, when the light goes out of its eyes, that's information. The breed's transparency makes these decisions clearer, if not easier. Many people who lose a Labrador get another Labrador. This is testament to something. The breed's flaws are real: the shedding, the energy, the food obsession, the expense. But for people who've lived with a lab, who've understood what the dog needs and provided it, the bond is profound enough that they're willing to do it again. There are also people who get one lab and never get another, not because the experience was bad, but because it was so singular, so specific to that individual dog, that replacement feels wrong. Both responses are valid. Dogs are individuals, even within breeds as recognizable as the Labrador. The breed will continue to evolve. Selection pressures are always operating. As working roles change, as pet roles shift, as health issues emerge and are addressed, the Labrador of 50 years from now will be different from the Labrador of today, just as today's lab is different from the St. John's dogs of Newfoundland. This is how breeds work. They're not static. They're populations responding to human selection and environmental pressures. Current concerns in the breed include the obesity epidemic, the temperament changes from irresponsible breeding, and the narrowing of genetic diversity in some lines. These aren't insurmountable problems, but they require attention from breeders and breed clubs. Health testing needs to be standard, not optional. Temperament evaluation needs to be prioritized alongside appearance. The working ability that defines the breed needs to be preserved even as most labs live as pets. There's tension in the dog world between preserving breeds as they were and adapting them to modern needs. With Labradors, the question is, were they meant to be fishing, dogs, gun dogs, or family companions? The answer is that they've been all three at different points in their history. The core traits, biddability, water drive, retrieving instinct, stable temperament, can serve multiple purposes. The challenge is maintaining those traits while addressing modern health and welfare concerns. Some argue the breed has become too popular for its own good, that popularity always degrades quality because demand encourages quantity over careful breeding. There's truth in this. The sheer number of Labradors means there's enormous variation in quality. A well-bred lab from health-tested parents who work or compete is a very different animal from a lab produced by someone breeding 2 random dogs, because puppies sell for $1,000 each. This isn't the breed's fault. It's a human problem. But the dogs pay the price. Shorter lifespans, more health issues, temperament problems that lead to surrender. The solution is education and consumer responsibility, asking breeders hard questions, insisting on health testing, refusing to support puppy mills and backyard breeders, choosing to adopt from rescues that properly evaluate and match dogs. The Labrador at its best, healthy, well-bred, properly raised, adequately exercised, given work that engages its drives, is an extraordinary animal. Athletic, intelligent, affectionate, versatile. A dog that can swim in freezing water, detect explosives, guide someone through a city, and then come home and lie calmly while a toddler uses it as a pillow. This range of capability is rare. The Labrador, at its worst, poorly bred, untrained, under-exercised, treated as a low-maintenance decoration, is a frustration. Destructive, hyperactive, anxious, overweight. But this isn't the dog's failing. This is a mismatch between what the dog is and what the human expected. Understanding the history helps. Knowing where the breed came from, what it was built to do, why it behaves the way it does. This context makes the dog comprehensible. The Labrador pulling on the leash isn't being stubborn. It's following instincts developed over centuries. The Labrador that won't stop retrieving isn't being obsessive. It's doing exactly what generations of selection designed it to do. Working with these instincts, rather than against them, transforms the experience of owning a Labrador. The dog that seems too energetic becomes an enthusiastic training partner. The food obsession becomes a powerful motivator for learning. The retrieving drive becomes the basis for games that tire the dog out and strengthen your bond. The breed's natural traits, properly channeled, are assets rather than problems. There's something fundamentally honest about Labradors. They don't hide what they're feeling. They don't scheme or hold grudges. A lab that's happy is obviously happy. Whole body wagging, mouth open in what looks like a grin. Every movement broadcasting joy. A lab that's anxious or stressed shows it clearly. Whale eye, tucked tail, tension through the body. They're readable in a way that makes relationship building straightforward, if you pay attention. This transparency is probably another artifact of the working heritage. A fishing dog that couldn't communicate clearly with its human partner would be inefficient. Selection favored dogs whose internal states were obvious, whose intentions were clear. Hundreds of years later, your pet lab still carries this trait. It's telling you things constantly. Whether you're listening is another question. The rhythm of life with a Labrador settles into patterns. Morning walks become ritual. Evening play sessions become anticipated. The dog learns your schedule and holds you to it. Labs are creatures of routine, comfortable with predictability. They know when it's time for food, for walks, for bed. They'll remind you if you forget. Insistently, with eye contact that borders on accusatory. This routine-oriented nature makes them relatively easy to live with once the routine is established. They're not constantly pushing boundaries or testing limits the way some more independent breeds do. They want to know what's expected, and then they want to do it. Over and over. Forever. This can feel monotonous to humans who crave novelty. For the dog, it's satisfying. Predictability is security. Seasonal changes affect labs noticeably. The approach of winter seems to activate something in their genetics. A readiness for cold water work that they don't actually need anymore but can't help feeling. Become more energetic as temperatures drop, more interested in swimming even when the water is freezing. Summer can be harder. That double coat that's perfect for the North Atlantic is less ideal for warm climates. Labs overheat relatively easily and need access to shade, water, and air conditioning on hot days. The shedding reaches peak intensity during spring and fall coat blows. For a few weeks, the dog seems to produce infinite amounts of loose fur. Brushing helps, but doesn't stop it. You accept that dog hair is now a textile that's woven into your life. It's in your car, your clothes, your food occasionally. People who successfully live with Labradors make peace with this reality early. Grooming needs are otherwise minimal. The coat is wash and wear, designed to shed water and dirt. Labs don't typically need professional grooming unless they've gotten into something particularly foul, which they will, because labs investigate the world thoroughly and without discrimination. Dead things, mud, standing water of questionable origin. The dog will find it and roll in it, then look at you with innocent surprise when you're horrified. The breed's relationship with water deserves emphasis because it's so fundamental to their identity. Not all labs love water. There are always individual variations, but most do, instinctively and passionately. The first time many lab puppies see a pond, they enter it without hesitation, swimming with technique they shouldn't yet know, and you realize you're watching genetic memory in action. Nobody taught this dog to swim. The dog just knows. Swimming is also excellent exercise for labs because it's low impact on joints while providing serious cardiovascular work. A tired swimmer is a calm housemate. Access to safe swimming areas is one of the best things you can provide a Labrador. Rivers, lakes, ponds, even the ocean, if conditions are safe. The dog will be happier, healthier, and more manageable with regular swimming. But water obsession has downsides. Labs will drink from puddles, ponds, streams, and other sources that may contain parasites or bacteria. They'll swim in water that's too cold for safety, not realizing they're developing hypothermia because they're having too much fun. They need management around water, which seems contradictory for a breed designed for water work. But modern pet labs don't have the same judgment their working ancestors did. The fishing dogs knew when conditions were dangerous because their lives depended on it. Your pet lab just knows that water is wonderful and must be entered immediately. The nosework capability of Labradors is often underutilized in pet homes. These dogs were bred to track and locate. Their scenting ability is excellent. Setting up simple nosework games, hiding treats or toys, and having the dog find them, engages this ability in ways that are mentally tiring. A dog that's used its nose extensively is often calmer than a dog that's only been physically exercised. Mental work tires dogs differently, more thoroughly. Detection work, even at an amateur level, taps into something deep in the Labrador psyche. The focus, the searching, the indication when the target is found. This is satisfying work for the dog. You don't need professional equipment. You just need a scent the dog is searching for and a systematic approach. Even 10 minutes of nose work can settle a dog for hours afterward. The breed's intelligence is practical rather than abstract. Labs aren't trying to outsmart you. They're trying to understand what you want so they can do it. This makes them very trainable, but not particularly creative problem solvers when left to their own devices. A bored lab won't figure out elaborate escape plans. It'll just be destructively bored in straightforward ways. Chewing, digging, barking. The solutions are obvious, usually involving something that fits in the mouth. Training methods matter with Labradors, perhaps more than with some other breeds, because these dogs are so eager to please that harsh corrections can shut them down completely. A lab that's been trained with heavy-handed methods often becomes uncertain, constantly checking in with anxious eyes, the natural enthusiasm dampened. Positive reinforcement training, rewarding desired behaviors rather than punishing mistakes, works beautifully with this breed. The food motivation helps. The desire for approval helps. You're working with the dog's nature rather than against it. But positive training doesn't mean permissive. Labs need clear boundaries and consistent expectations. They're happy to follow rules once they understand what the rules are. The confusion comes when rules are inconsistent or unclear. A dog that's sometimes allowed on the couch and sometimes not, with no pattern it can discern, becomes anxious. A dog that knows the couch is always off limits or always allowed can relax. Clarity is kindness. The breed's forgiveness is remarkable. A lab that's been corrected too harshly, ignored for too long, or mishandled in training usually bounces back quickly once treatment improves. They don't seem to hold grudges. This resilience is wonderful, but also dangerous, because it can mask problems. An owner might not realize they're doing things poorly, because the dog keeps trying anyway, keeps attempting to please despite inadequate training or care. The dog deserves better than to have its resilience exploited. Separation anxiety can develop in labs, though it's not universal. The breed's desire to be with their people, combined with insufficient independence training, can create dogs that panic when left alone. This manifests as destruction, vocalization, or house soiling. It's not spite, it's genuine distress. Prevention is easier than treatment, teaching the dog from puppyhood that alone time is normal and safe, building independence gradually. For adult dogs with established anxiety, treatment requires patience and often professional help. The prey drive in Labradors is generally moderate. They're not typically obsessive chasers like some hunting breeds. Most labs can be trained to coexist peacefully with small animals, though the retrieving instinct means they might try to pick up cats or small dogs, not aggressively, but as objects of interest. This is manageable with training, but requires vigilance, particularly with young labs whose impulse control is still developing. Some labs retain stronger hunting instincts, particularly those from field lines. These dogs might be more interested in chasing wildlife, more alert to movement, more prone to taking off after birds or squirrels. It's not a flaw, it's the working genetics expressing themselves. But it means the dog needs secure fencing and reliable recall training before being given off-leash freedom in areas with wildlife. Recall, coming when called, is critical for labs, because their enthusiasm and curiosity can override caution. A lab might run into traffic chasing a ball, not because it's stupid, but because the retrieving drive is stronger than self-preservation in that moment. Recall training needs to be proofed extensively, with high-value rewards and increasingly distracting environments. Even then, some labs are never trustworthy, off-leash outside secure areas. This is knowing your individual dog and managing accordingly. The aging process in labs often includes weight gain, unless actively managed. The food motivation doesn't decrease with age, but activity level usually does. Older joints appreciate less impact. Energy reserves diminish, but the dog still wants to eat everything, always. Portion control becomes even more important as the dog ages. An overweight senior lab is at much higher risk for arthritis progression, diabetes, and shortened lifespan. Cancer is unfortunately common in labs, particularly as they age. Mast cell tumours, lymphoma, hemangiosarcoma. These appear with dispiriting frequency in the breed. Some are genetic, some are random. Regular veterinary checkups, awareness of lumps or changes, and early intervention can sometimes make a difference. Sometimes they can't. This is the bargain of loving a dog. They don't live as long as we do, and the end often involves difficult decisions. The Labrador's legacy, though, isn't just in individual dogs, but in the breed's contribution to understanding canine genetics, behavior, and working ability. Labs have been studied extensively by researchers because they're common, relatively uniform, and well documented. Much of what we know about canine hip dysplasia, exercise-induced collapse, and genetic health issues comes from research on Labradors. The breed has advanced veterinary knowledge simply by existing in large numbers. Labs have also demonstrated the range of what dogs can do in partnership with humans, from pulling nets in 19th century Newfoundland to detecting cancer in modern medical research, from guiding people through cities to comforting children in hospitals. The versatility is genuine. This isn't a breed that does one thing extraordinarily well. It's a breed that does many things competently and adapts to new tasks readily. That adaptability, that willingness to try, that fundamental good nature, these are the gifts of those Newfoundland fishermen who kept the dogs that worked, that listened, that came back to the boat. They couldn't have imagined their working dogs becoming the world's most popular breed, living in cities and suburbs, appearing in movies, detecting explosives at airports, guiding people who can't see. But they would probably recognize the core of it. A dog that wants to work with humans. A dog that's steady and reliable. A dog built for hard conditions, but gentle enough to trust. That dog, the St. John's dog, the Labrador Retriever, is the same animal, doing different jobs now, but still fundamentally itself. It's late now. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, perhaps there's a Labrador sleeping nearby, maybe sprawled across the floor in that impossible way they sleep, legs everywhere, completely relaxed, maybe curled on a dog bed, nose tucked under tail, maybe pressed against someone's feet under a desk, just being near. That dog is carrying history in its bones, the cold waters of Newfoundland, the fishing boats and the endless work, the journey across the Atlantic, the estates of England, the long refinement into a breed, the spread across the world. All of that is written into the dog's genetics, its instincts, its drives. And tomorrow, when that dog wakes up, instantly, fully operational, ready for the day with more enthusiasm than any creature should possess before coffee, it will want the same things its ancestors wanted. To be near you, to work with you, even if the work is just a game, to retrieve something, anything, to swim if water is available, to eat, always to eat, with the unshakable conviction that starvation is imminent despite evidence to the contrary. These aren't bugs in the system. These are features coded over centuries, refined by necessity and selection. Understanding this doesn't make the dog easier, exactly. A Labrador is still a Labrador, demanding, energetic, perpetually hopeful about food. But understanding makes the dog make sense. The behavior that seems excessive or frustrating becomes comprehensible when you remember where it comes from. The modern world asks dogs to be things their ancestors never were: quiet in apartments, calm in crowded cities, content with minimal exercise, patient with long hours alone. Some breeds adapt to this more easily than others. Labradors can adapt, they're flexible enough, but it costs them something. A working dog without work doesn't stop being a working dog, it just becomes a frustrated working dog. The best Labrador lives are the ones that honor what the dog is, that provide water and retrieving and physical challenges, that engage the dog's mind and body, that give the drive somewhere to go. This doesn't require living on a fishing boat in Newfoundland. It requires awareness and effort, a commitment to meeting the dog's needs, not just feeding it and hoping for the best. For people willing to make that commitment, a Labrador offers something rare, a partnership that feels mutual. The dog isn't just tolerating you or depending on you. It's actively engaged with you, interested in what you're doing, ready to participate. This is the working dog heritage, expressing itself in a modern context. The dog wants to be part of your life, your team, your daily routine. It wants a job, even if the job is just being an excellent companion on morning walks. There's a particular kind of contentment in a well-exercised Labrador. The frantic energy settles. The constant motion stops. The dog lies down with a sigh that sounds almost human and just exists peacefully for a while. In those moments, you can see what the breed was meant to be, a capable working animal that's done its work and can rest, satisfied. These moments don't last long. The lab will notice a bird outside the window, or hear a bag crinkle, or simply decide that lying down is boring and it's time to find something to retrieve. But while they last, they're perfect. The dog is fully itself and fully at peace, which is all any animal can ask for. The Labrador Retriever will continue evolving. Breeds always do. The labs of 2050 will be shaped by the selection pressures of that time, what people value, what health issues emerge, what work exists for them to do. But the core traits, the ones encoded by all those Newfoundland winters and fishing boats and close partnerships with working humans, those will likely persist. Biddability, water drive, retrieving instinct, the desire to be near people and work with them. These traits have survived the transition from working dog to family pet, from fishing boats to suburban homes, from Newfoundland to everywhere. They've proven durable across contexts, valuable across purposes. A dog built for one kind of work has shown it can do many kinds of work, as long as work is offered. And that's the lesson, really. Not that Labradors are perfect or easy or suitable for everyone, but that they're honest. They show you what they are clearly. The energy, the drives, the needs, none of it is hidden. A Labrador tells you exactly what kind of dog it is from the beginning. The rest is whether you're listening. Outside, somewhere, it's dark or it's getting there. The day is ending or has ended. In homes across the world, Labradors are settling in for the night. Some on dog beds they'll abandon for the floor by midnight. Some pressed against their people on couches they're not technically allowed on. Some in kennels, working dogs resting between shifts. Some in shelters, waiting for someone to understand what they need and choose them anyway. Each one carrying that same heritage. The black dogs of Newfoundland, the cold water and the endless work. The journey from functional obscurity to global popularity. The transformation from tool to companion, though the line between those has always been blurrier than we admit. A Labrador is a working dog that might never work in the traditional sense. But it's still a working dog, in its bones, in its drives, in what it wants from life. Understanding this is the beginning of giving the dog what it deserves, not just care and feeding, but purpose, context, a way to be fully itself. The breed asks for participation, for engagement, for recognition that the friendly dog on your floor is also an athlete, a retriever, a swimming machine, a partner waiting for partnership. Meet it there, in that space, and you'll find something worth the effort. The story of the Labrador Retriever is the story of work becoming companionship without losing its essential nature. A dog shaped by human need that shaped humans in return, teaching us about loyalty and drive and the satisfaction of doing a job well. From Newfoundland's rocky coasts to living rooms everywhere, the breed has travelled far. But it hasn't travelled away from what it was. It's brought that history along, carried in every dog waiting to be acknowledged. And now, in the quiet of this ending evening, maybe that's enough. The history told. The dog understood a little better. The distance between what we expect and what the dog actually is. Maybe that distance has narrowed slightly. Rest well. The Labrador on the floor certainly will. Somewhere around 2 a.m., it will move to a different spot for reasons known only to itself, making a surprising amount of noise for an animal that weighs 70 pounds. And in the morning, it will wake up with the same enthusiasm it had yesterday, and the day before, and every day since Newfoundland fishermen first took those black dogs onto their boats. That enthusiasm, annoying at 6 a.m., charming by mid-morning, essential to who the dog is. That's the legacy. Unquenchable optimism paired with unquenchable drive. The belief that today is a good day to retrieve something, to swim somewhere, to be near someone, to work. It's a good way to live, actually. The Labrador has been trying to tell us this for 200 years. Maybe we should listen.